Drew here, and The Handmaid's Tale really aggressively amped up the pacing in the second and third episodes of season 4. I feel that the show is on pretty firm creative footing, and it was really engaging throughout these episodes. I feel, though, that there was a lot of suspension of disbelief, particularly at the end of The Crossing, that they really need to figure out a way to keep the story engaging without constantly having Gilead act in ways that are inconsistent with the ways that the system has been portrayed in the past. But I'll give specific examples in a bit. But first off, Nightshade, episode 2, I thought that this was pretty much a flawless episode for the most part. I like seeing June have a more active plan for taking on the system in Gilead as she hatches this plot to poison these commanders that are visiting these Jezebels nearby. And I am enjoying the budding relationship between her and Mrs. Keyes, played by Mckenna Grace. I think that the mother-daughter dynamic here is heartwarming to see in a weird way, but also really sad as you see how messed up this character, Mrs. Keyes, is, that she's been through so much and that she's so brutal in the way that she reacts to the people of Gilead. And, you know, who can blame her? And to some extent, June is encouraging it. I thought that the reaction after, you know, Mrs. Keyes had pleaded with June to take her with her when they left, and June agrees, you know, eventually, and seems to have decided to trust her. I hope that that trust is not misplaced. It's a little bit unclear what happened to Mrs. Keyes at the end of Nightshade, and she wasn't in The Crossing, so hopefully she's in more of the rest of the season. I'm interested to see more of this character, but hopefully she wasn't the one who betrayed them somehow. But that moment where June asks her, "Have you been poisoning your husband?" Excellent acting by Elisabeth Moss. I really admire her performance. This really was an acting showcase in these 2 episodes, allowing her to display so much range of emotion. And she does it so subtly and in unexpected ways. I think that the mark of what a great actress she is that there's these scenes where you would expect her to play it one way, and then she plays it for an altogether emotion. And I'm sure some of this is the directing, but she's still, I'm assuming, making a lot of these decisions herself, and they are very good acting decisions. It's hard to think of a performance on TV that rivals this. The ending of this episode was so intense with the score, and I knew the moment that they showed up back at the farm that something was off. And then when June says that line, "Something's wrong," I was so tense. I was having a hard time looking at the screen. I was so tense. And the build up to that moment where she gets sprayed with the blood of the man that's with her, I was, like I said, not hardly able to look at the screen. A lot of the tension was dissipated when Nick showed up, though. I think that having him be a powerful individual with influence in Gilead is a bit of a problem, because it makes it seem like at any future point, if they were to decide, you know, June should not be the lead of this show anymore, we're going to have her die, we're going to have Gilead execute her, and, you know, that happened, you would have to question why, because why wouldn't they have executed her immediately at this point? I know they wanted to know where the handmaids were, but once they knew where the handmaids were, why wouldn't they execute her immediately? I feel like it's inconsistent with the way that the system has been portrayed and how little care they have for the lives of handmaids that they wouldn't do that. And if the argument is that Joseph and Nick went to bat for her and were able to protect her, then I feel that the question still remains, why wouldn't they be able to do that in the future? I guess that at some point Nick and Joseph may no longer be in play, but I feel like they've got to stop having these détentes between Gilead and June. It was really hard to suspend disbelief that they would stick her back in the handmaid's outfit. I thought it was hard to suspend disbelief that they would stick her back in the handmaid's outfit in season 3 after all that happened in season 2, but After the ending of season 3, I thought there was no way they were going to try to do that again. And to have her under the supervision of Aunt Lydia once more, no. This is just, I didn't buy it, let's say. But otherwise, in the episode Nightshade, I really felt that the development of Emily and Moira as they're trying to find homes for these kids, and Luke as he's trying to advocate for June and to take care of this child that is not his child but is June's child with Nick. I felt like these plot lines, while slow, I thought that they were very interesting. I particularly enjoyed the scene where Emily and Moira were discussing the ramifications of June's actions and how from their perspective she is always kind of just making rash decisions and relying on other people to mitigate the consequences of those decisions. And they also talk about her stubbornness. I feel that it was really compelling to seeing this plot line where Moira is trying to help this child adjust to his new home with this woman who I believe is his aunt, and that, you know, he won't even accept his real name, that he's been in Gilead so long that he thinks of that system as, you know, being his home, and he can't be comfortable there. The moment where Rita came and tried to help him feel somewhat like things were still the way that they had been, I thought that was a really touching moment. Now, The Crossing. I had very, very positive feelings about this episode until the last third. I felt like the first 2/3, it was very intense. A lot of it, there were these very long torture scenes that would go on, and there wasn't really, it was a little bit repetitive because it was basically them just putting June through the ringer again and again. But what I liked was that they definitely had this progression where it got worse and worse for her, and you kept wondering when she would reach the breaking point, because you knew that she wouldn't be able to endure this forever, that she wouldn't be able to protect Alma and Janine and the other handmaids forever. And it's too bad that, knowing that June had likely been captured, they weren't able to keep moving, and that they ended up getting captured eventually when June gave them up. But watching June go through this, you know, as I said, this was really an acting showcase for Elisabeth Moss. The emotions, the defiance, the horror, the relief, all the emotions that she had to act during these scenes, and that, you know, she was going through these terrible physical ordeals, the waterboarding, watching these 2 women killed because she refused to give up the other handmaids, and then that it was ultimately her daughter that broke her, when her daughter was frightened of her, and seeing that and realizing the suffering that her daughter was going through. You know, as someone who has children, if you want to break a person, yeah, the kids are the way to do it. And I thought the scene between her and Joseph, again, I don't really buy that Joseph would have influence in Gilead at this point, but the scene between her and Joseph, I thought the acting from Bradley Whitford and her was both excellent. I thought that they had good chemistry, and I thought that the revelation when Joseph said, "I would have thought you'd have figured this out by now, June. Gilead doesn't care about children. It's all about power." I thought that that was a very, very revelatory moment, and the realization that, yes, they will torture even children to get what they want, to hold on to their power. I think that that was something, I think June knows that Gilead is evil, but I think that it was interesting that she was surprised that they would stoop even to that level. And I think the blinders have come off even more. I mean, not that she really has much of a blinder on when it comes to Gilead. I also thought that there was a good payoff during the torture scene from the line in the premiere when she tells Aunt Lydia that God has abandoned this place. In the first episode, you know, she talked about how she told Mrs. Keyes that she believed that God would bring justice to these people for what they've done. And, you know, I think someone pointed out in the comments that she was probably just telling Mrs. Keyes what she needs to hear to a certain extent. But I do think that that was reflective of a mentality that June had, that she was going to be this instrument of God's vengeance on the people of Gilead. And then after being captured and tortured and, seeing all these horrible outcomes for the people that she has been trying to protect, that she's come to believe, well, God has abandoned this place and everything that happens here may have nothing to do with God. Again, she might be saying this to a certain extent because she knows that it will press Aunt Lydia's button, but still it was a, really, really telling moment. Now, the ending of this episode is where I kind of lose a little bit of enthusiasm for this episode because, yes, I believed everything that up to the point where they stopped torturing her because, again, I just don't buy that they would stick her in the Handmaid's outfit again and that they would give her to Aunt Lydia to supervise. In the first episode, we saw this panel of men saying that Aunt Lydia was only being tolerated because she was old and they were making allowance for her age. And then somehow this episode, they think that the right thing to do is to put all these handmaids under her supervision with one guard with a handgun after all the things that they've done. This really, really required a lot of suspension of disbelief, and that they wouldn't even lock the vehicle, and that they wouldn't have any kind of manacles or shackles on the handmaids, that they would just be able to hop out of the back and make a run for it like this. It really, really was hard to swallow. And I feel, you could argue the fact that they're making them handmaids again is that death is too good for you sort of trope, but I really don't buy it. They would be dead. If this wasn't a TV series, Gilead would kill all of these women for their role in this 86 children being smuggled out to Canada. I firmly believe that. But this scene, it was an emotional moment watching so many of these characters that we've spent time with who I didn't really know most of them by name, but they're, familiar faces, people that we've identified with in their struggles throughout the series. And that moment where Alma and the other handmaid gets hit by the train, June having to try and get Janine moving again so that they can continue on their escape. I feel, again, I think the show will be on firmer footing if they just keep June on the run and fighting the system. I think if they have her get captured again and then let go again or have to escape again, that's going to be really problematic, because how many times can you do this and have us believe that anything is at stake if Nick and Joseph are just going to step in and protect her every time? So we'll see. I mean, they can probably pull out of this repetitious cycle, but I really want to see them do it and not have it happen again. So that moment, very, very emotional moment. I thought that it was a good decision to go back to the beginning when these handmaids had this connection when they were first being brought under the system and being, pushed down, having their free will stripped of them, and how they were clinging to each other, showing this scene of them holding hands through it all. I thought that that was a good way to wrap up the episode and to, emphasize the human impact of these deaths. Lastly, the twist that Serena Joy is pregnant. I think that it's an interesting twist. I feel like so much of her motivation as a character has been her desire to have children and her frustration at her inability to do so. So how this will change her, how this will change the dynamic between her and Frank, I think that's going to be interesting to explore. And, on the whole, I think that that's going to be some interesting dramatic terrain. So those are my thoughts on episodes 2 and 3 of The Handmaid's Tale Season 4. I know I've been a little bit negative. Probably some of you are annoyed by that, but I really am enjoying this on the whole. I think the directing is strong, and it's still on very, very strong creative footing for the most part. Surprisingly so, given that this is season 4 and that this is one of those premises that you feel like there's a limited amount of things that you can do with while still following the same character, but I'm still here for it. So let me know what you thought in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of other shows, please consider subscribing. As always, thank you for watching.